All right, guys. So episode 8 of Foundation was holy crap. Like some massive revelations here and a couple of threads that still have some things left to be pulled before we get to the end of the season, but we still got two more episodes left. I'm a couple of days behind, but I got up early, at like 3 o'clock this morning. It is Sunday, September 3rd, to watch it. So I'm bedhead, bedbeard, and I don't care because this was great. This was a way to wake up. Actually, this episode was so complex. A lot of times when I watch the show, I don't take show notes, but today I actually took like 3 pages of notes here to talk about like all the things. So, um, yeah, this is an episode, so strap in. If you haven't watched this episode or even the show yet, what are you waiting for? But also, spoiler alert, because I am going to spoil all the things here. I don't leave anything by the wayside. So if you don't want things spoiled, make sure to watch it first. Um, yeah. So here's your countdown: five, four, three, two, one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Because I review all sorts of shows and films and video games. Daily streams at 11 a.m. Don't forget the Discord. Links are down below. So, this episode starts off with suspicion regarding Demerzel, and the thumbnail I chose is, I think, a poignant part of this episode because this is all the big, I think, major plot point that gets unraveled here is who is Demerzel, and you see Brother Dusk and the Handmaiden from Dominion are pulling at these threads, and they uncover this is some pretty amazing stuff. Which we'll get to that. I'm going to try to do this in chronological order, so bear with me as I go through my show notes here. But essentially, they start off with this scene where they are in front of the sand painting that Dusk has worked on, adding to over the years. And the handmaiden is telling him about how, there's what's going on here. You seem to have, you know, these memory blocks. And he's like, there's no memory blocks. And she's like, yes, there is. Like, where did Demerzel come from? What's going on? And he starts to repeat this phrase over and over and over. She's always been here. She will always be here. And the handmaiden's like, that's got to be programming, right? And this triggers a memory within Dusk. And he's thinking about the robot uprising, and they're watching the mural, and they're thinking about the history. And he's calling into question things as he begins to realize that he can't remember everything. And he should be able to remember everything because he's Cleon, right? He's the Emperor. Why can't he remember things? So that calls into question things. And then as they're looking at the sand mural, they see a bit of the sand when they're looking specifically at the history between the robots and humans. They get to this point where he realizes there's a point in the mural that's not moving. And they have to come back to that, though, because they've been called away to the execution. Meanwhile, we jump to the other planet, and the telepath bitch, Queen, confesses to Gale that Harry's dead, Zelda's a prisoner, and so is Gale in this chamber with like these resonance frequency waves coming down here to disrupt her mind and her mental blocks. And that's going to be really important for what comes at the end of the episode. Meanwhile, though, the best scene in this episode, one of the most action-packed scenes of the whole season so far, has been this sequence of um, Day preparing to execute the clerics on live broadcast to everyone and flat out threatening Terminus. He's like, I have a fleet of ships around your planet, um, and you're all a bunch of terrorists, and this is what we do to terrorists, right? And they go to cut off the heads of the clerics, and then in the middle of this, boom, Whisper Ship drops in, does this, it blasts everyone across the balcony, damages people, kills people, almost kills Day. And it's Hober Mallow, and he is here to rescue Constant. Unfortunately, he doesn't get Polly out, but he does get Constant. And this whole scene is so awesome. Um, because he's sparking a rebellion at this point. But in the chaos of all of this, there's a bunch of stuff that happens. One, the handmaiden sees Dominion and Dawn hugging each other in the middle of all this chaos, and that's not supposed to be happening. And here comes Becky, the crazy displacer beast, out of the ship, and she like grabs Day by the shoulder and like throws him across the balcony to the edge, and she unfortunately loses her life, but it's this crucial moment of Day realizing that he is no longer top of the food chain as he's laying on the precipice, holding his hands up, screaming in abject terror as this beast is ready to bite his head off. And of course, then the guards shoot her and she falls off. And it's a very tragic moment, but also, this is when Hober Mallow escapes with Constant, and everybody knows now that Empire is vulnerable. And that's a very, very interesting feeling for him in particular. Um, we then get this scene, which is a very crucial scene because of what happens at the end of the episode. The general, with his lover and soldier friend, the soldier's like, "You found your revolutionary," or the general says, "Looks like they've, found the revolutionary," and his lover says, you know, that's that's this moment of we're going to be able to use that as the spark. Um, he just proved that Empire can be touched. So that they are going to betray Empire. They're going to join the other side. They're absolutely going to join Foundation. It's going to happen, especially considering end of the episode. We'll get to that here in a second. We then get this speech where they're in the inner chambers and it's in the aftermath. Everybody's bleeding and bloody, and Day wants to go to Terminus and he wants to confront them. He's like, Dusk is like, we need to go to war and respond in kind, and Day is like, no, I'm gonna go there and I'm going to take this nuclear device that I have, but I'm going to go there in person. I'm going to take those whisper ships because they belong to us, and I'm going to talk to them. And he wants to prove this whole thing. He basically wants to take the nuclear device, and he wants to take this thing. He wants to nuke the whole planet into oblivion, but he wants to do it in person. Um, Pretty intense. Um, Now, Queen Sarah, I think is her name, Dominion Queen, approves of Day going because in her mind, I'm going to be able to get rid of him in one fell swoop, and Dawn and I can rule. And this kind of might play out. I'm not sure exactly, but um, the the idea here is that Day leaves Dawn in charge as he goes off. Of course, Demerzel's pissed, but she goes with him anyway. And there's this sequence then that happens with the handmaiden confronting the queen. You're being too emotional. Look at what you're doing with Dusk. It's too risky. Think of your people. She's like, just you take orders from me. I listen to you, but ultimately I am the queen. I make the decisions. But there's this line that she gives the handmaiden to the queen. She's like, be patient. Wife and widow are both called Empress. And I was like, oh, that's potent. She's like, wait until you're actually crowned and then get rid of Day however you want. Meanwhile, this kid drops a package into the cell for Seldor and tells her that Gale is being prepped for the table, which we don't know what that is. But this sparks this, thing in Gale, or excuse me, in Seldor that I need to get out, I need to get out. And she ends up having the Radiant tucked away in her jacket, and she uses this to reach out to the copy Selden who's inside the vault. And then he suddenly realizes, oh shit, I'm a copy. Um, his line of like, fuck, I'm the left hand. Like the right hand is doing all these things with a left hand, is it supposed to know what the right hand is doing? He's like, fuck, I'm the left hand. It was a brilliant, but he's coming to realize that the second foundation is here, but now the original is dead, and there must be other copies and all this other stuff. Um, Hober and Constance drop out of space around Terminus and see the Imperial blockade, and as they do this, they decide that they're going to have sex on the ship to celebrate, their survival. Meanwhile, Harry's copy shows up and presents himself to the warden and gives this whole speech, and then goes back inside and has this moment of realizing that, well, I guess we're going to contact Hober Mallow again because he's the key to all of this. So he writes Hober Mallow, and it shows up on the towers again. Meanwhile, though, the general shows up and captures Hober Mallow at the ship. Now we don't see what happens. All we know is they're naked in bed, Hober and Constant, and the general is like, "Hey guys, yeah, don't worry about it. I'm not going to harm you, but you are under arrest and you're coming onto my ship now." And this is going to lead to them defecting. Um, it because why else would he? It's got to lead to defection. That's all I can say. Um, Now things start to progress here really quickly because as this is happening, Dusk takes the handmaiden back to the painting and they discover the hidden passage in a stairwell. Early wake up, guys, sorry. Leading down. Well, at the same time, Dawn takes out his birth control and has sex with Dominion. So now they're going to get pregnant. Um, that's going to lead to complications. And then we're back on the telepath planet, and we realize that the bitch queen is able to take her consciousness and project it into other bodies. Gale is so strong, and she realizes that she can use that strength to fully protect her people, but in order to put herself into that body, she's had to break down her psychic defenses. But in the process of all of this, Selden's advice to Gale gets Seldor, sorry, Harry's advice to Seldor has her breaking out of her prison cell. Now, we don't get a culmination to this because we know that's going to happen in the next episode or two, but we're left with Gale on the table screaming as she realizes that this lady is going to put her consciousness into her body and she's no longer going to be Gale. But the big question here, as Dusk and Dominion get to the bottom of this chamber, and they're presented with a projection, I guess, of Cleon the First, saying that for many years this was like a prison cell, but it's no longer that way. And basically, the question here is, who programmed Demerzel? Well, it was Cleon the First. So this whole time, everything that's ever happened has always been part of the plan of Cleon the First. And Demerzel is his forever queen, his forever empress, and she has manipulated everything from day one, which is why Dawn and Dusk and Day, none of them actually have all of their memories. And remember when we go back to the episode, a couple episodes ago, maybe, when Dusk and the Handmaiden were researching the size of the memory files, they realized that Cleon's memory files are like, you know, hundreds of times larger than the memory files of the clones, which means things are being held back from the clones. And so Dusk is having this crisis of realizing that he's been manipulated his whole life. Um, and Day is also breaking free. Excuse me, Dawn is also breaking free. Man, that's just confusing. Day is also breaking free of his programming with the Queen, with Seraph, the Queen Dominion, and then Day is just off on his own deep end with Demerzel at his side, and she loves him, I think, in a way that maybe she hasn't loved anyone since Cleon the First, because she sees in him a copy. I don't know, but it's intense. We've only got 2 episodes left. I don't know where it's going by the end of this, but it's craziness, man. But I'm loving how it's all unraveling here, and I just can't wait for the last 2 episodes because you know it's going to end in war. But the question is Day going to eat it by the end of this episode so that we feel sweet justification for him being a complete douchebag, and then seeing what happens when Dawn takes over? I don't know. And what is Dusk going to do with this information now that he knows that Demerzel is behind everything? And yeah. I don't know, man. Lots and lots and lots of threads. But there could be something here too. Is Demerzel maybe Demerzel is the one who's planned it all and programmed everything. We don't know. Like she's the only survivor of the rebel of the robot uprising. Really? What happened there? Time to find out. Anyway, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, everybody. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see everybody in the next one, which is next week. We got 2 more episodes to go. Until then.